1968 was a pivotal year in American history, a year defined by violence, division, war, tragedy and profound social change. The United States remained deeply embroiled in a brutal conflict in Vietnam, while college campuses across the nation became battlegrounds for growing anti-war protests. It was also a year marked by two of the most significant political assassinations in modern American history. In April, Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights leader whose vision of equality and justice had inspired millions, was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. His death sparked widespread civil unrest, with protests and riots erupting in more than 110 cities across the country. Just 2 months later, Robert F. Kennedy, brother of President John F. Kennedy and a leading Democratic presidential candidate, was murdered in Los Angeles moments after winning the California Democratic primary. Amid the turmoil, political change was underway. Republican nominee Richard Nixon won the presidential election on promises of restoring law and order and bringing stability to a nation that seemed increasingly fractured. At the same time, the Civil Rights Act of 1968 was passed by Congress, prohibiting discrimination in housing and marking another major victory for the civil rights movement. The year would ultimately conclude on a more hopeful note. In December, Apollo 8 successfully became the first crewed mission to orbit the moon, capturing the imagination of millions and cementing America's place at the forefront of space exploration and technological innovation. Yet, amidst all the chaos and uncertainty, a group of friends from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania set out to make their first feature film, a film that would forever change the landscape of cinema. More than 5 decades later, it remains as impactful, terrifying, beloved, and fiercely discussed as ever. A cornerstone not only of horror genre, but of independent filmmaking itself. That film was the seminal masterpiece,
Night of the Living Dead.
From July 1967 through January 1968, a team of hard-working, ambitious and dedicated filmmakers came together with a simple goal: to create an entertaining film that would haunt audiences long after the credits rolled. The group originated from a commercial production company known as The Latent Image, headed by George Romero, Russell Schreiner, Rudy Ritchie and John Russo. Having gained experience producing commercials, industrial films and segments for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, they eventually joined forces to form a new production company, Image 10. Drawing upon their collective knowledge and limited resources, they set out to create an ultra-low budget independent horror film in and around Evans City, Pennsylvania. What emerged was 96 minutes of terror unlike anything audiences had experienced before. Inspired in part by Richard Matheson's 1954 novel I Am Legend, the filmmakers crafted a story centred on the dead returning to life and feeding upon the living. It was a concept that felt radically different for its time. Prior cinematic zombies seen in films such as White Zombie and I Walked with a Zombie were rooted in voodoo traditions and portrayed as mindless servants under another's control. That image had become the accepted definition of a zombie, but Romero and his collaborators had other ideas. Rather than following convention, they reinvented the monster entirely. Their undead were cannibalistic, relentless and driven by a singular instinct to kill and consume human flesh. More importantly, anyone could become one. Your father, your mother, your child, your friends. The zombie was no longer a distant supernatural creature. It was us. Through infection and transmission by biting, the filmmakers created a concept that blended elements of the traditional zombie with characteristics of vampires, resulting in what Romero would later describe as a blue-collar monster, ordinary, recognisable and terrifyingly plausible. It was a revolutionary idea, and with the creation of the flesh-eating zombie, they struck gold, forever altering the course of horror cinema and popular culture. That's enough about the zombies for now. It's time to talk about the people who made all of this possible. The filmmakers behind Latent Image and later Image 10. the men and women who brought this groundbreaking picture to life. First up, George A. Romero. Born on February 4, 1940, Romero developed a fascination with film from an early age. One movie in particular left a lasting impression on him: the 1951 Powell and Pressburger fantasy film, The Tales of Hoffmann. He would often cite it as both his favourite film and the work that inspired him to pursue filmmaking himself. After graduating from Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh in 1960, Romero quickly found work directing television commercials and producing short films, alongside friends John Russo, Russell Schreiner and Rudy Ritchie, through their production company Latent Image. During this period, Romero would contribute to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was also around this time that he and 9 of his acquaintances formed a new company, Image 10. Throughout the 1960s, Romero and his collaborators steadily honed their craft, taking on a variety of commercial and industrial projects. One notable example was the Calgon Story, a promotional film about laundry detergent. While these jobs may have seemed insignificant, they provided invaluable experience and demonstrated the remarkable talent behind the camera. More importantly, every dollar earned was carefully saved with a single goal in mind: financing a feature-length motion picture. In 1967, that dream finally became a reality. George A. Romero was about to fulfill his lifelong ambition of directing his first feature film. But who were the other individuals who helped make Image 10 possible? First among them was John A. Russo, born September 2nd, 1939. Russo was introduced to Romero through their mutual friend, Rudy Ritchie, who had attended the same university as Romero. Before joining the group, Russo spent 2 years in the United States Army after being drafted into military service. Upon returning home, he joined Romero, Ritchie and Schreiner at Latent Image Productions. It was Russo who developed the initial story concept involving flesh-eating ghouls terrorising the countryside. Romero immediately saw the potential in this idea, and as they say, the rest is history. Next is Russell Schreiner, born February 6, 1940. Schreiner would go on to enjoy a long and active career in film, television, advertising and production work. He first met Romero in 1959 after appearing in a stage production and discovering they had a mutual friend. Their first meeting left quite an impression on Romero, who soon invited Schreiner to participate in one of his projects. Fascinated by the filmmaking process and quickly forming a closer relationship, Schreiner joined Romero and Ritchie in creating Latent Image Productions. Together they took on virtually any local project they could find, building both experience and professional relationships along the way. Last but certainly not least is Rudy Ritchie, perhaps the unsung hero of the entire story. Born on February 14, 1940, Ritchie was an accomplished writer during his university years, earning recognition and awards for his poetry and short stories. It was during this period that he first met George A. Romero, and the two quickly became close friends. In fact, Ritchie even taught Romero how to drive. Alongside Russell Schreiner, Ritchie helped lay the foundation for what would eventually become Image 10. When John Russo joined the group, the team was finally complete. Those who knew Ritchie often spoke of him as an indispensable figure in both the formation of the company and the creation of Night of the Living Dead. More than that, he was remembered with great affection as a loyal friend and a driving force behind the group's success. As mentioned earlier, Latent Image eventually evolved into Image 10. The remaining members included Gary Schreiner, Russell's brother, who served as both a production associate and actor, Bill Hinsman, actor and cinematography, Richard Ritchie, Rudy's brother and a production associate, Vince Savinsky, actor and production associate, finally Carl Hardman and Marilyn Eastman, who contributed as both producers and performers. These individuals may not be household names, but without their combined talent, determination and willingness to take a chance on an ambitious independent film, Night of the Living Dead may never have existed, and several of them will play a much larger role in our story very soon. Night of the Living Dead tells the story of one terrifying night in which a group of unlikely survivors find themselves trapped inside a remote farmhouse, while being besieged by flesh-eating ghouls. As the undead gather in ever-increasing numbers outside, tensions begin to boil over within the house itself. Before long it becomes clear that the zombies may not be the greatest threat after all. At its core, the film is as much about human conflict as it is about horror. It explores the challenges of cooperation, trust and leadership under extreme pressure. Can people put aside their differences and work together for survival? Or will fear and ego tear them apart? As the bitter rivalry between Ben and Harry Cooper reaches its breaking point, the group's chances of survival begin to unravel. Following a disastrous attempt to escape using a truck, tragedy strikes. Barbara remains trapped in a catatonic state. Harry's daughter slowly succumbs to her infection in the basement, and the ghouls continue their relentless assault on the farmhouse. As the walls begin to give way, the survivors' fate seemed all but sealed. Then morning arrives. A heavily armed posse, accompanied by police officers and local news crew, sweeps through the countryside, hunting down the remaining ghouls. As they approach the farmhouse, dispatching zombies along the way, the film reaches its devastating conclusion. Ben, who has survived the night, survived the undead, and survived the constant clashes with Harry Cooper, cautiously emerges from his hiding place after hearing voices and gunfire outside. Moving toward a window, he is spotted by the posse and instantly mistaken for a ghoul. A single rifle shot ends his life. That brief synopsis only scratches the surface of what Night of the Living Dead has to offer. The premise itself is deceptively simple, but its execution was revolutionary, particularly for 1968. Romero takes the familiar base and the siege concept and elevates it through raw violence, believable human interaction, and an atmosphere unlike anything audiences had experienced before. The film taps into the ultimate "what would I do" scenario. How would you survive? What would your plan be? Would you side with Ben's approach or Harry's? Who is right and who is wrong? These questions linger throughout the entire experience, inviting the audience to place themselves directly into the nightmare. What makes the film so effective is its realism. There are no brilliant scientists, heroic military commanders, or larger-than-life action stars here. These are ordinary people with ordinary flaws, making ordinary mistakes while facing extraordinary circumstances. They panic, argue, and crack under pressure in ways that feel painfully authentic. Even by modern standards, the character dynamics remain compelling. For a film released in 1968, they were remarkably ahead of their time. With production underway, the script completed, and the blueprint for the modern zombie firmly established, the next challenge was bringing these characters to life. Who would portray these everyday men and women suddenly thrust into the apocalypse? Who would become the heroes, villains, and tragic figures of Romero's bleak vision? Let's meet the cast. Ben is the unlikely hero of Night of the Living Dead, a man searching for refuge after a close encounter with the undead. He is one of the first characters to truly understand the threat facing humanity. Practical, resourceful, and determined, Ben is driven by a powerful survival instinct and a genuine desire to protect those around him. While not every decision he makes proves successful, his courage, intelligence, and natural leadership qualities make him the film's moral and emotional centre. After arriving at the farmhouse and discovering a traumatised Barbara, Ben immediately takes charge. He fortifies the house, searches for supplies, and begins formulating a plan for survival. When the other survivors reveal themselves, he encounters his true antagonist. Not the undead outside, but the stubborn and self-serving Harry Cooper. Their constant clashes create some of the film's most compelling drama, as personal pride and fear threaten to tear the group apart from within. Despite suffering setback after setback, Ben perseveres. He survives the horrors of the night, only to meet a tragic and deeply ironic fate at dawn. The man behind Ben was Dwayne Jones, born on April 11, 1937. Exceptionally educated and remarkably accomplished, Jones studied at the University of Pittsburgh, the Sorbonne in Paris, and New York University. Before pursuing acting professionally, he worked in a variety of educational and cultural roles. He taught literature, designed English language training programs for the Peace Corps, served as an exchange scholar, and chaired the English department at a prep school he helped establish. To describe him as a man of many talents would be a considerable understatement. Through his life, Jones dedicated himself to helping others, particularly young people seeking opportunities in education and the arts. His casting as Ben became one of the most significant decisions not only in the production of Night of the Living Dead, but in the history of American cinema. At a time when black actors were rarely given leading roles in mainstream films, Jones found himself at the centre of a groundbreaking production. George A. Romero consistently maintained that Jones was not cast because of his race, but because he was simply the best actor for the role. Originally, Ben had been written as a rougher, more aggressive character. Another actor, Rudy Ritchie, who we had mentioned previously, had initially been considered for the part. However, once Jones became involved, the character evolved. His intelligence, dignity, and commanding presence transformed Ben into something far more memorable. Those seemingly small casting decisions ultimately helped make film history. While Night of the Living Dead would likely still have been a notable horror film, it is difficult to imagine it carrying the same cultural weight without Jones in the lead role. His performance resonated deeply in a nation still grappling with racial tensions during one of the most turbulent periods in American history. Yet beyond the social significance, Jones succeeds because he is simply extraordinary in the role. From the moment he appears on screen, he commands attention. He is instantly likeable, instantly believable, and instantly someone the audience wants to see survive. His screen presence is magnetic, his delivery flawless, and his portrayal of Ben so definitive that it is impossible to imagine anyone else playing the character. Although race was never specified in the screenplay, Jones made the role entirely his own. Off-screen, he earned a reputation as a consummate professional. Those who worked alongside him consistently spoke of his intelligence, generosity, and dedication. It is difficult to find anyone from that era who had a negative word to say about him. He left a lasting impression on cast and crew alike, earning their admiration both as an artist and as a person. Following Night of the Living Dead, Jones appeared in several films, the most notable being the cult horror classic Ganja and Hess from 1973. Much of his later career focused on theatre, an art form that he deeply loved. He served as executive director of the Black Theatre Alliance and later the Richard Allen Centre for Culture and Art, continuing his lifelong commitment to supporting and nurturing the next generation of performers. Sadly, on July 22, 1988, Dwayne Jones suffered cardiopulmonary arrest and passed away at a hospital in Long Island, New York. He was just 51 years old. His legacy, however, remains immeasurable. Jones inspired countless actors and filmmakers, demonstrating that talent, intelligence, and determination could challenge long-standing barriers within the industry. His performance in Night of the Living Dead helped pave the way for greater representation in leading roles, and remains one of the most important performances in horror history. The impact he had on those around him is evident today. Watching interviews with George A. Romero and Carl Haldman, it is impossible not to notice the affection and respect they still held for him decades later. The naming of the Dwayne L. Jones Recital Hall at the State University of New York at Old Westbury stands as a lasting tribute to his influence and achievements. Dwayne Jones was a truly remarkable individual. Without his unforgettable performance as Ben, Night of the Living Dead would not hold the same place in cinematic history, and the landscape of horror cinema might look very different today. Judith O'Dea, born April 20th, 1945, portrayed Barbara, the film's initial protagonist, and the character for whom the audience first experienced the unfolding nightmare. For the first 15 minutes, Barbara serves as our guide into Romero's world before Ben takes centre stage. After witnessing her brother's brutal death at the hands of a ghoul, she flees to the farmhouse in a state of shock and gradually descends into near catatonia as the situation around her deteriorates. Although she finally breaks free in the film's closing moments, by then it is tragically too late. Surprisingly, little information exists about Judith O'Dea's early career. Determined to become an actress, she moved to California while still young to pursue her ambitions. Eventually, she received a call from Carl Haldman inviting her to audition for a low-budget independent horror film. She accepted. And thank God she did. Harry and Helen Cooper were portrayed by Carl Haldman and Marilyn Eastman, born March 22nd, 1927 and December 17th, 1933 respectively. Hardman delivers a remarkably convincing performance as Harry, portraying him with such desperation, stubbornness and selfishness that audience often find themselves rooting against him. Even when some of his survival instincts may be the most logical in the house, Eastman, meanwhile, brings a quiet strength to Helen Cooper. Though trapped under Harry's domineering influence, Helen continually stands up for herself and her daughter, voicing her concerns and refusing to be completely silenced. Her resilience gives the character a subtle but powerful presence. However, what Hardman and Eastman contribute behind the camera may be even more impressive than their on-screen performances. Both were experienced professionals in advertising and audio production, making them invaluable members of Image 10. Their industry connections, technical expertise and willingness to take on multiple responsibilities proved essential to the film's success. From makeup and photography to sound effects and location scouting, they seem to be involved in every aspect of production. Their efforts helped to transform an ambitious idea into a completed feature film. Rounding out the cast were Keith Wayne as Tom, Judith Ridley as Judy, Kyra Scone as Karen Cooper, Russell Striner as Johnny, and William Bill Hinsman as the cemetery ghoul. These were not established Hollywood actors, but friends, acquaintances, and local talent united by a shared desire to make the best film possible. That passion shines through in every frame. This was true guerrilla filmmaking. Blood, sweat, and tears were poured into every stage of production. The team borrowed vehicles including John Russo's mother's car, secured a farmhouse that was already scheduled for demolition, and spent countless hours repairing and transforming it for filming. Production days stretched into long nights as cast and crew worked tirelessly to bring Romero's vision to life. It was a film made by a community, for a community. Nearly everyone involved, regardless of their role, recalls the experience in much the same way. They loved making the movie. George Romero's enthusiasm and creativity inspired those around him, and many collaborators, including Russo, Striner and Hinsman, would spend years attempting to recapture the magic they experienced on Night of the Living Dead. The same names repeatedly appear throughout Pittsburgh's independent film scene during this era, and the success of Romero's film helped spark a creative boom for local filmmakers. But once production wrapped and the film was completed, a new challenge emerged: finding an audience. When distributors viewed the film, many responded with the same demand: change the ending. Romero and Striner refused. They believed in the film they had made and were unwilling to compromise in its bleak conclusion. Eventually, a distributor called Continental agreed to release the picture as it was intended. Initially, Night of the Living Dead arrived with little fanfare. For several months it seemed destined to come and go without making much of an impact. Romero and his collaborators had already begun moving on to other projects. Then something unexpected happened. Word of mouth began to spread. Audiences talked about the film. Overseas markets embraced it. Gradually, this small independent horror picture transformed into a genuine phenomenon. Produced for approximately $114,000, the film would go on to generate an estimated $30 million in revenue. By any measure, it was an extraordinary success. You might assume that such a triumph launched Romero and his friends into wealth and stardom. Unfortunately, reality was far less kind. Originally, the film's title was Night of the Flesh Eaters. It remained the working title almost until release. Shortly before distribution, the title was changed to Night of the Living Dead, a suggestion that Romero and the rest of the team immediately embraced. There was just one problem. When the title was changed, the copyright notice was accidentally omitted from the final release print. As the film's popularity exploded, the devastating consequences of that oversight became clear. Without proper copyright protection, the film effectively entered the public domain. Despite creating one of the most successful independent horror films ever made, Romero and his collaborators saw very little financial reward from his success. It was a mistake that haunted Romero for decades, and likely cost the filmmakers millions of dollars in lost revenue. It remains one of the most costly oversights in cinema history. Had that mistake never occurred, both Romero's career and the broader landscape of horror filmmaking might have looked very different. Another event was unfolding at the same time, one that would further shape the film's legacy. As Romero and Striner travelled to New York with a print of the completed film, hoping to secure distribution, news broke of the assassination of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. The nation was stunned. America was already in turmoil, and King's death sent shockwaves across the country. According to those involved, Romero and Striner immediately realised that given the film's themes and especially its ending, they were carrying something uniquely powerful in the trunk of their car. The timing was impossible to ignore. Sometimes history and art collide in unexpected ways. As America grappled with political unrest, social upheaval, racial tensions, and a rapidly changing cultural landscape, Night of the Living Dead arrived at precisely the right moment. What began as a small, low-budget horror film made by a group of friends from Pittsburgh suddenly felt larger than anyone could have imagined. The country was changing, cinema was changing, and standing at the forefront of that transformation were George A. Romero and Night of the Living Dead. The legacy of Night of the Living Dead continues to be felt more than half a century after its release. Countless spin-offs, remakes, sequels and adaptations have attempted to recapture the film's unique magic, though few have managed to bottle that same lightning twice. Beyond the screen, the film has inspired an enormous range of merchandise from books and action figures to collectibles and memorabilia of every kind. The impact of the films extends far beyond popular culture. Evans City Cemetery, where the iconic opening sequence was filmed, has become a pilgrimage site for horror fans from around the world. Annual conventions and fan gatherings continue to celebrate the film's legacy, with cast and crew members such as Judith O'Dea, Russ Streiner and John Russo regularly appearing to share their stories and memories from the production. Over the years, countless behind-the-scenes anecdotes have emerged, painting a picture of a passionate group of filmmakers who had little idea they were creating cinematic history. Many of those involved would go on to expand their world of the living dead in their own ways. John Russo co-created The Return of the Living Dead, while Bill Hinzman directed his own continuation, Flesh Eater, in the late 80s. Most notably, George A. Romero returned to the genre with Dawn of the Dead in 1978, beginning a series that would define zombie cinema for generations. It is no exaggeration to say that virtually every zombie-related piece of media released since 1968 owes something to Night of the Living Dead. From television series such as The Walking Dead to video game franchises like Resident Evil. From children's cartoons featuring zombies to Halloween costumes and haunted attractions. The DNA of Romero's film can be found everywhere. With this one groundbreaking picture, George A. Romero transformed a zombie from a relatively obscure creature of folklore into the flesh-eating monster that dominates popular culture today. Despite his enormous influence, Romero remained remarkably humble throughout his life. He may never have become wealthy from Night of the Living Dead, and he often expressed mixed feelings about being forever known as the zombie guy. But his contribution to cinema is immeasurable. He created one of the most influential, important and beloved horror films ever made, while proving that great filmmaking does not require a massive budget or a Hollywood studio. His success demonstrated that a group of friends with a camera, determination and a vision could create something that would resonate for decades. The film's influence can be seen in the careers of countless filmmakers who followed in Romero's footsteps. Directors such as Wes Craven, John Carpenter, Sam Raimi and David Cronenberg emerged with their own gritty, low-budget horror films, helping to reshape the genre and inspire future generations. Each in their own way owes a debt to the path Romero helped forge. Because of a copyright error, Night of the Living Dead entered the public domain almost immediately upon release. As a result, it has received countless home media releases across the world. Yet despite that unusual fate, the film's cultural standing has only grown. It has been preserved and celebrated by major institutions, earned a place within the Museum of Modern Art, and received a meticulous 4K restoration through the Criterion Collection. Critics and scholars continue to praise its social commentary, groundbreaking storytelling, and unflinching depiction of society in crisis. Today, Night of the Living Dead stands as one of the cornerstones of modern horror cinema. It remains a film that is studied, discussed, restored, referenced, and celebrated. More than just a horror film, it is a cultural landmark whose influence stretches across generations. So to everyone who worked on the film in any capacity, thank you. Your work has provided audiences with decades of entertainment, inspiration, and fascination. As a fan, I am deeply grateful for what you created. But what comes next for The Living Dead? How do you follow the ultimate zombie film? Well, every night must come to an end, and with the end of the night comes a new dawn.
Dawn of the dead. Night of the living dead has ended. Dawn of the dead is here.
Till next time, thank you all for watching. This video has only scratched the surface of the incredible history behind Night of the Living Dead. I encourage anyone interested to seek out the documentaries, interviews, books, and archival materials surrounding the film, because few cinematic legacies are as fascinating or as influential. Thank you again for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this journey into the history of one of horror's greatest achievements. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.